There's a curious thing that's been happening in politics. People seem to be consistently saying things and towing the exact same line and repeating what others are saying effectively verbatim within the establishment class. Why is it that journalists, news reporters, and government officials are all towing the same line and effectively repeating the same thing word for word? That's weird. It's almost like they have some kind of script that they follow. Well, with the release of the Israel Project's 2009 Global Language Dictionary, we can see that that's actually exactly what happens. And that's why so many of the people within the corporate press, the journalist class, the political apparatchiks, they all sound the exact same when they talk about Israel. It's because they've used this booklet and they've gone through, and this is how they've structured their arguments by using the talking points from this piece of literature. We will be jumping in and running through the chapters real quick, as well as jumping in and talking about Thomas Massey in this video. Thank you for watching. Let's go ahead and get into it. We will be starting this off with archive.org. And what's that? What do we have here? Item not available. Well, this was the Israel Project's 2009 Global Language Dictionary, but they had it pulled down. I don't even know how they got something removed from archive.org. Nonetheless, I was able to find a copy and I downloaded it. So what do we have? We have the Israel Project being something that is basically constructing the narrative around how you're supposed to talk about the nation state of Israel. Before we go into this, I just want to preface this by saying anyone that tries to tar me with the brush of anti-Semitic, it's not going to work, because I don't care if people are of any race, religion, or creed. It doesn't matter to me. Arbitrary characteristics of the factors of your birth do not create the value of the individual. And with it, another thing that these people that always consistently throw out terms like anti-Semitism never seem to know is that even the Arabs in the region of Jerusalem are Semites. So if you're being anti-Semitic, you can even be anti-Semitic towards that of the Muslim Semites. But they don't even know this because they just use words like anti-Semitism to wave a flag to act like they're a good person. Now let's get into it. The Israel Project's 2009 Global Language Dictionary. When I saw this, I kind of froze and I was like, this isn't real. Like, obviously this isn't real. And then I thought about it as I went through it and I was like, oh, of course this is real. This is absolutely legit. And guaranteed, there are so many different other things that the US government has under its wraps that the people within the establishment class have booklets just like this so they can use to talk about specific things. Because while the corporate press and while the politicians, they may not be incredibly smart people, what they are good at doing is relaying talking points so they can construct a narrative perfectly established for the actual establishment to get a proper foothold. Now, what do we see? Table of contents. We have Chapter 1, 25 Rules for Effective Communication. Chapter 2, a glossary of words that work. Chapter 3, how to talk about Palestine's self-government and prosperity. Chapter 4, isolating Iran backed Hamas as an obstacle to peace. Chapter 5, the language of tackling a nuclear Iran. Chapter 6, Gaza, Israel's right to self-defense and defensible borders. Chapter 7, peace and the central message. Chapter 8, the settlements. Chapter 9, Jerusalem. Chapter 10, loan guarantees and military aid. Chapter 11, the security fence and checkpoints. Chapter 12, the right of return equals the right of confiscation. Chapter 13, the United States and the United Nations. Chapter 14, talking about Arab Israelis. Chapter 15, talking about children and the culture of hate. Chapter 16, lessons to learn from President Obama's language. Chapter 17, talking to the American left. Chapter 18, Israel on campus communications. Appendix 1, the toughest questions. Appendix 2, the Hamas covenant. Appendix 3, important facts. And Appendix 4, posters that work. So what they're doing here is they're literally laying out the guidelines of how the political class should be talking about Israel so that they can try and activate you emotionally, and with it, they will then try and logically reason why your emotional activation is the place that you should sit in, and that you shouldn't try and actually find the path out of this place with which you sit that is based on nothing more than pure emotionalism. No, you should simply sit there, stew in it, and then we can justify why you had that feeling, and you don't actually have to rationalize it yourself. This is unbelievably insane. Well, I mean this when I say it. When I found this, I was like, there's no way this is real. And then when you start to realize the way that the journalists talk and the way that they end up feeding specific narratives around things like Israel and Palestine, and you think of the talking points and then you read through this, you realize this is exactly what they're using. Nonetheless, I'm going to cut that part here and we're going to go ahead and jump into this article from The Independent. And man, I thought it was so fascinating because The Independent, while they do end up dropping the ball on occasion, when they write a good article, man, do they knock it out of the park. Let's go ahead and jump in. This article was written in 2014 and it shows us two very important things. One, good journalism, always ever relevant. And two, the narrative surrounding the Israel-Palestine conflict hasn't shifted hardly at all in the surrounding decade. And with it, we can see that the journalist class and the political apparatchiks are still using the same talking points to construct their arguments. Let's get into it. The secret report that helps Israel hide facts. The slickness of Israel's spokesman is rooted in directions set down by the pollster Frank Luntz. Israeli spokesmen have their work cut out explaining how they have killed more than 1,000 Palestinians in Gaza, most of them civilians, compared with the just 3 civilians killed in Israel by Hamas rocket and mortar fire. But on television and radio and newspapers, Israeli government spokesmen such as Mark Regev appear slicker and less aggressive than their predecessors, who were often visibly indifferent to how many Palestinians were killed. There's a reason for this enhancement of PR skills by Israeli spokesmen. Going by what they say, the playbook they are using is a professional, well-researched, and confidential study on how to influence media and public opinion in America and Europe. Written by the expert Republican pollster and political strategist Dr. Frank Luntz, the study was commissioned by a group called the Israel Project, with offices based in U.S. and Israel for use of those who are fighting the front lines battle for the media war for Israel. Every one of the 112 pages in the booklet is marked not for distribution or publication, and it is quite easy to see why. The Luntz report, officially entitled the Israel Project, 2009 Global Language Dictionary, was leaked almost immediately to Newsweek Online, but its true importance has seldom been appreciated. It should be required reading for everybody, especially journalists interested in any aspect of Israel policy, because its do's and don'ts for Israeli spokesmen are quite fascinating. These are highly illuminating about the gap between what Israeli officials and politicians really believe and what they say, the latter shaped in a minute detail by polling to determine what Americans want to hear. Certainly, no journalist interviewing an Israeli spokesman should do so without reading this preview of many of the themes and phrases employed by Mr. Regev and his colleagues. The booklet is full of meaty advice about how they should shape their answers for different audiences. For example, the study says that Americans agree that Israel has a right to defensible borders, but it does you no good to define exactly what those borders should be. Avoid talking about borders in the terms of pre or post 1967 because it only serves to remind Americans of Israel's military history. Particularly on the left, this does you harm. For instance, support for Israel's right to defensible borders drops from a heady 89% to 60% when you talk about it in the terms of 1967. So what they're saying here is you have to avoid the historical context of what happened so we can sell the people of the world on the narrative that we want and basically construct history from the starting point that we deem most valuable, which is that completely obfuscates all of our blame and all of the issues that have been plaguing this land for generations. Let's go ahead and throw this into Twitter now. This article is fantastic. I cannot recommend it enough. It will be in the description down below, as will everything that I always use for all of my videos. Nonetheless, let's go ahead and continue. We're going to be starting this off with Thomas Massie, and when I saw this tweet, my jaw hit the floor. Holy based! Once again, Thomas Massie proving he is the only person within all of American politics who can actually be trusted. He's the only politician I like and the only one I can argue does not deserve the helicopter treatment. What I think is so unbelievably incredible about this is the reaction from so many within the political and journalist class. What do we see? They're calling him anti-Semitic, people who have no understanding of what Zionism actually is. You can be anti-Zionist and not be anti-Semitic. Because, as I've already stated, the Arabs within the land of Jerusalem are in fact also Semites. So if you're going to be anti-Semitic, you can not only be anti-Semitic against Jewish people, but you can be anti-Semitic against the Arab Semites. But no one ever talks about that. No one ever wants to address it. They just want to talk about the fact of how, well, you're anti-Semitic, so we really have to address how this is a problem. And then they'll try and correlate you not actually supporting the Zionist state of Israel or Zionism as a whole as you being anti-Semitic. And here we can see Chuck Schumer. Rep. Massie, you're a sitting member of Congress. This is anti-Semitic, disgusting, dangerous, and exactly the type of thing I was talking about in my Senate address. Take this down. No. And here we go, emotional platitudes from people in the political class. They don't actually give a shit about you. They'll gladly send your sons and daughters to go fight and die abroad in these conflicts that they will fund and fuel endlessly. And then with it, they will moralize about you being someone who is anti-Semitic simply because you didn't want to send your sons and daughters to go fight and die for the expansion of the state of Israel. Massie with an absolute banger response. If only you cared half as much about our border as you do my tweets. S-tier response from Thomas Massey, and then we jump into this. This week, I will vote against H-Res 894. Anti-Zionism isn't anti-Semitism. The resolution states that all anti-Semitism is anti-Zionism, that it is either intellectually disingenuous or factually wrong. The most senior Jewish member of the House. One thing people have to get through their head is, and I mean this is something that's been programmed into so many, especially the boomer cons. If you criticize Israel, that does not make you anti-Semitic. There are plenty of Jewish people, Orthodox Jews, who do not support Israel. And we will get into a video of that in just a moment. But first, before we do, let's go ahead and play this, and then we will get into our final video, and that will be our closer. Let's jump in.
More problematically, the resolution suggests that all anti-Zionism, it states that all anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. That is either intellectually disingenuous or just factually wrong. And it unfairly implicates many of my Orthodox former constituents in Brooklyn, many of whose families rose from the ashes of the Holocaust. While most anti-Semitism is indeed anti-Semitic, the authors, if they were at all familiar with Jewish history and culture, should know about Jewish anti-Zionism that was and is expressly not anti-Semitic. This resolution ignores the fact that even today, certain Orthodox Hasidic Jewish communities, the Satmar in New York and others, as well as adherents of the pre-state Jewish labor movement, have held views that are at odds with the modern Zionist conception. According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, quote, the anti-Zionist worldview of the ultra-Orthodox groups, like the Satmar Hasidim, perceives Zionism and the establishment of the State of Israel as an anti-Messianic act. That is to say that these ultra-Orthodox Hasidic Jews believe that only the Messiah can bring about the true Israel. And I assure you, the Satmar Hasidic Jews are certainly not anti-Semitic. I should also note that there are those who try to smear even progressive pro-Israel supporters with the inappropriate label of Israel hater or anti-Zionist. Under this resolution, those who love Israel deeply but criticize some of its policy approaches could be considered anti-Zionist. That could make every democratic Jewish member of this body, because they all criticize the recent Israeli judicial reform package, de facto anti-Semites. Might that be the author's intention? Again, let me be unequivocally clear. Most anti-Zionism, particularly in this moment, has a real anti-Semitism problem. But we cannot fairly say that one equals the other. As the most senior Jewish member in this House, with perhaps the largest Jewish constituency in this country, I have always and will always support real, meaningful legislation to combat anti-Semitism. This, of course, is deeply personal for me and for so many of my constituents. Indeed, I take a backseat to no one in this body when it comes to fighting against this scourge. In the aftermath of October 7th, we have a moral obligation to act to protect our own Jewish citizens and our critical ally, Israel. I pray that the GOP majority makes today the day that they stop playing these partisan games and commit themselves to doing the real work to protect Jewish lives. There is not a single minute to spare. I reserve the balance of my time.
Over 60,000 anti-Zionist Jews gathered in New York, singing, "Israel is not the state of the Jews, Zionism is not Judaism." Well, isn't that just fascinating? And then you see people like in the Senate, in Congress, the upper echelons of government, and what are they saying? They're calling people who disagree with the nation state of Israel anti-Semitic. Fine, I want you to walk into this room filled with 60,000 Jews, take that microphone that this man right here is holding, and tell every single one of them that they are anti-Semitic. Much like the Hasidic Jews that I grew up knowing, I can guarantee you these people would rather die than betray their faith, but you will sit there and tar them with the brush of anti-Semitism. Unfucking believable. These are people who actually had their families exterminated in things like the Holocaust, and you will sit there and claim that they are perpetrating the thing that was thrown against their fucking families that caused them to be put against walls and thrown into gas chambers. You are a despicable person and should be treated with zero respect. You are not a serious person and you should be treated exactly as such. I'm going to go ahead and cut it there after we play this clip. The thing is, I would love to go to this party. These motherfuckers are getting down, and it looks like an absolute blast. Let's go ahead and play this because I'm getting a little heated talking about this, and I could use a smile. beautiful voices. Dude, I'm surprised the floor's not caving in. They're just bouncing around, dancing, having a blast. 60,000 anti-Zionist Jews gathered together just so the people within the Senate and Congress that have no understanding of anything that has to do with history or anything of the Jewish faith can sit there and claim, well, actually, they're just anti-Semitic. The people in Congress and the people in government that would use these kind of emotional ploys to beat you into submission realize that that is the enemy class. I'm going to go ahead and call it there. Thank you for watching if you got this far. Tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section down below. Thumbs up if you liked it. Thumbs down if you didn't. Tell me where I'm wrong, because I will gladly go through it. If you give me something to read that tells me why I'm wrong and actually gives me an understanding of why you think what you think, I will gladly go through it. But nonetheless, you actually have to provide it. Thank you for watching. Thumbs up if you liked it. Thumbs down if you didn't. Stay lovely, stay great. Tell someone you love them. Peace out.